And we're live.
Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. Today I want to talk about the Schmincke HORADAM aquarelle. To celebrate 125 years, Schmincke have brought out 35 new colours for their range of watercolours. They are really vibrant, and 32 of these 35 new colours are single pigments, and a single pigment gives you so many mixing opportunities. Alongside this, they have brought out a trowel set exclusively for the SAA. The colours in the set have been introduced not because of their colours specifically, but because of their characteristics. And as with any colours I get, I need to find out what they do. And it's always a useful task. Sometimes you think, oh, it's a waste of time, but actually it's really useful because you get surprises. So I've just done swatches of the colours. And on here, I've seen how opaque they are, seen how well they lift out. All important things when you're painting. And then I've done a little colour chart. So mixing the purple with the purple or purple with the perylene green, just to see how they mix. And actually, I've found out some really exciting characteristics. So the perylene green and the cobalt violet hue, if they're mixed, make the colours still stay separate. The violet stays separate and the green stays separate, so they kind of intermingle but don't fully mix. Really exciting. And the same with the Potter's pink and the French ultramarine. Again, not fully mixed, so you've got splodges of pink and the making of violet. It's really exciting. And by doing this, I've learned a little bit more about their characteristics, and now I can understand how to apply them. So with any watercolour you get, just do swatches. It doesn't have to be quite as complicated as this. It can be simple. See which colours mix, and you'll be surprised sometimes. So today is February the 14th. So I'm going to paint you a rose using some of the colours out of the new 35 colour range, and some of those colours are in the trowel set. So I've sketched out a rose. It's not a bright red rose, it's a dusky pink rose. And what I'm going to do is, with a few drops of water on here, so I need to isolate the water. I could paint round them, but to be honest, for quickness, I often isolate just areas. So using the fine masking fluid brush, I'm just going to add touches of white. And because I'm putting this on thinly, it means I don't have to wait to let it dry for ages. It dries pretty quickly. So on this one, just isolate. And I'm not filling the whole drop because I want some colour to run into it while I'm painting. When you're painting a raindrop, it's often nice sharp white will often give you a really good indication that this is a drop of water. So just dip in, and I'm being very, you probably won't be able to see it, and I can't see it as well. So 1, 2, 3. No, I think that's it. Now I'm going to clean my brush, and you'll see here I've got 3 pots of water. The reason for this is I've just used masking fluid and I need to clean my brush, because if I left the masking fluid on the brush, it can ruin the brush. Now, painting with watercolour, you do have to be careful, especially with your water. This is why I've got 2 pots, and I explain why I'm using 2 pots. But if I had cleaned my masking fluid brush in one of these pots I'm then going to use a watercolour, I can contaminate my water. So now I've cleaned my brush, I know that's going to be able to be used next time, and I'm getting rid of the pot. The reason is then I don't accidentally put the brush into the water I've cleaned the masking fluid with. So I've got 2 brushes. To be honest, I don't think I'll be using the big brush, and normally this is against what I tell people. I always find a bigger brush does more. But on this occasion, I've tried this before, and actually I'm finding that the smaller brush is much more easy to get this detail and slows me down a little bit more, rather than the very looseness. I'm trying to do this a little bit finer. But I have it here in case I change my mind and I want to go back to it. So what I'm going to do is just load up my brush. This is a natural hair brush, so I need to make sure it's very wet. With a natural hairbrush, if you just dip it in the water, you won't get the point. So I need just making sure I'm loading the brush of water, because it's natural hair, very much like your own hair. If you just dip it in, all you're doing is wetting the outside. You're not soaking into the belly of the hair. So that should be nice and wet. Just taking off some excess because I don't want it too wet. I'm just going to start with one of these new colours and just add a little bit of colour to the belly of the rose. Now, dirty water and clean water. I'm going to try, remember, I don't always. And again, I'm just taking off some of the water from the belly because I want to move and soften the colour I've put on, because I don't want it quite as strong as I had it. Now you can see there I've gone over the drops because I've isolated the white areas. They will come back nice and clean when I take them off at the end. Dirty water. Okay. And you'll see I'm doing a kind of circular motion because I want to have a nice clean wash of colour. And with the small brush, I do find you do need to just move it around a little bit. So into this bit here I often forget, and I'm just putting a wash. And because I know, and I've tested, I know that they're easy to lift, I'm not so worried that if I overwork an area, I can't lift it back, because I've tested it. It's a little bit sharp there. Okay. I put a wash on because for me that just gives me a good start. Plus now I'm working wet in wet when I add some more colour, because the paint I put down is wet. It's a little bit more controlled. So now adding some of the dusky colour. Having to work quickly, but for me quite controlled. And you'll see the brush was getting a little fluffy. All you need to do is just make sure when you're painting with a natural hairbrush, you roll the brush round in your hand. That will keep its point longer. Okay, water. Just soften. I want to make this rose quite soft, quite delicate, especially the head bit. And then with the petals and the greenery, you can do that quite quickly and quite softly and easily. You don't need to over worry because the detail is in the rose. Now remember, I'm following a rose, an image of a rose, but nobody else knows what it looks like. So actually I've missed bits out, I've moved the leaves. Great. This is how, as an artist, you can, make things work for you. This side is actually quite dark. This is a lot darker, but because I'm using one colour, I haven't mixed anything into this colour yet. I can build up in layers, glazing it's called, gently glazing colours over one another. Now you can do this with transparent colours, so you have a nice yellow base and gradually put different colours on top. As long as they're transparent, an opaque colour will cover. So all I'm doing is making sure that I'm gently adding tone to put some darkness into. And you'll see the water hasn't yet got too dirty that I need to swap. It is something I forget. You've got to go dirty water and then clean water to keep it nice and fresh, but it's the same colour at the moment. I haven't yet muddied the water enough. So dabbing off some of the wetness. I'm going to do one more wash, a much stronger colour. And then I think I'm probably working too much. So I'm going to stop, think about my darker tones and work into those. I want to keep some of the colour behind. So here you can see I'm just adding, making sure that some dark colour is getting into the raindrops. What I am finding is the colour's drying a lot lighter than I anticipated. So you put a wash on which looks quite strong and it's starting to become a lot softer. Not a problem. Like I say, I'm using the same colour, so it's easy enough to layer and build up. And actually for me, probably going to give me a much softer image. So this is where I like to have a little bit of character. Rather than really soft finish, I'm using some of the dry brush to add some texture. Okay, so for me, it's still a bit flat. I need to look at some darker tones. So using this red, I tried adding some French ultramarine, which you expect you'd make a nice purple, which it does, but to me it was too purple. It didn't seem to work, so I'll show you. I'll add some on here. Yes, it makes a nice shadow colour, but it wasn't really the colour I was looking for. So I will use it, but then I'll show you how I've darkened off using a colour which is a colour you would not have thought of mixing with the red. And I found this out by doing those test swatches. So it's a nice colour. It works okay. Just cleaning off my brush just to be able to soften. I want to add some into the drops, and here it's darkest. So it's a nice colour, but it wasn't dark enough, so it doesn't give me the darker tones I was looking for. So because I did those test swatches before, I found that adding the red and the perylene green, which you would think would make a really, it's not a colour you would expect to mix together, but actually this gives me the dark I'm looking for. Much stronger. Just need to add it. When I'm painting, I will use test strips just to make sure that the colour I'm putting on is not a surprise. You can see that makes a lovely dark shadow colour. That's better. That's the colour I was looking for. But if I hadn't mixed those colours previously, it's not something I would have thought of doing. I would have had to kind of keep mixing and while I was painting to get the right colour. Whereas I've done it all before, I'm armed with the information in advance, making it much easier just to paint your rose. So you can see this rose is a dusky pink. I'm blotting off because I just want to soften a little bit more and bring some more darkness in here. For me, this is working very slowly and very controlled, but it's a good exercise, and it is always useful to try different things. This is how different mediums help you change the way you paint and draw, and you can find that a medium you've always painted with, I've only done watercolour, when actually maybe you're suitable to acrylics, and if you try it, or pencil drawing, or something that's different. And I know a lot of people do stick and get very good at one medium, but sometimes just trying either a different way of drawing. For me, this is much slower, much more controlled, but it's fun. I'm learning things, and it's always a learning curve. So you can see how much work I'm doing, much layering I'm doing, and that's because these colours are single pigment. If I was doing this with colours with multi-pigments, I have to be a lot more careful, because I would have muddied the colours by now. Right, just adding that last dark tone. I did say the work would be done on the rose, because the other bit, like the background and the petals, the leaves, is quite quick. So I'll leave it at that. We'll have a short break. Join me in a few minutes, and then we'll get on with just finishing off the piece.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA, Society for All Artists, is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing to be a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I could shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
And we're back.
Hello and welcome back. So while you've been away, I've had a chance to dry this off and actually to review and look. And there's a couple of areas I just need to neaten off just before I go into and just move around a little bit just before I start to finish. Okay, I know that seemed very small amount, but for me, it just needed to be done. Those little finishes just make the difference. So water's getting dirty now, so now I'm having to remember clean water for the next new colour. So this time it's the Turner's Yellow, which is in the trail set. And I just want to simply, whoops. See, I've forgotten, dirty, but it doesn't actually matter because this time I know all the colours are going to just be greens and yellows. It is something you have to master, not just the painting, it's trying to keep your water clean. And you'll notice I've done quite strong pencil lines, mostly so I can see them under the lights. But for me, keeping the lines is actually part of the drawing process. I'm not one to get rid of them. I got a little bit too wet and went into the rose, but it's easy to dab off. Again, done it again. So you can see how things can easily be moved. But I like the pencil lines. I actually find them as part of the process. So I keep them. I've heard people say, how do I get rid of the lines under my painting? Not so easy when they're underneath. So you apply them a lot softer, more fine. But for me, I actually like them. I think they're all part of the process. Like I say, these are a little harder than I would normally have, mainly for the reason I just want you to see what I'm doing. So just adding yellow. Basically, I'm creating a wet background, but I'm just adding the colour. So you would think ultramarine and yellow to make a green. Now it does make a good green, but I find it a little dull. So again, I'll probably go back into using the perylene green. So this is drying a little bit. You can see at the bottom here it's nice and wet, and at the top it's a little dry. Not a problem, I can blend that out later. I'm trying to keep some of the yellow and let it show through. And you can see how simply and actually how quickly these leaves are starting to come together. I'm adding a little bit more darkness. Again, bringing out that drop. Wiggling my brush around just helps me to add some texture. For the fine point, I'm just making sure I'm rolling my brush. I think that's quite effective already. I know it probably needs another layer of dark, but I'm going to do that while it is wet, because what I want to do is be a little bit crisper, a little bit cleaner. But for this bit, for getting down, this is the fun bit, it'll be much greener on top. And I'll add some green underneath. Not overly worrying, letting the paint do the work. I'm all for letting your material do the job for you. What I'm going to do, I do know these rose leaves, don't know if it's going to work, have little touches of red at the end. I'm just seeing if I'm dropping it into this wet, how far they'll bleed. Might bleed too much. Seems to be working. And actually, didn't do this in the one I tried before, but I'm going to try it now. I think I'm going to add a little bit of red to the rose stem. What I'm thinking is just tying the colours together so they don't look so separate. Right, so I'm going to go into perylene green just because it's given me a much darker green. What you see, I skip around. Often I'm letting areas dry before I go back into them. So I don't like that colour. That is quite a strong greeny colour. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a little bit of the yellow and a touch of the red. I'm just dulling it down a little bit. And by adding the same, you see I've got a very small range of colours, and they harmonise each other. They work in conjunction with each other because I'm having to use them together. So I've just added a little bit of red into this. Not going to make, need wetter, a huge amount of darkness, but you can see there that's suddenly pinging those darker areas out. Just throwing the underneath of the rose into shadow. And again, you can see it's quick. It's loose, but it may be loose, but it's also controlled. It's under here, just dabbing off because there's quite a lot of colour on there, just so I can push the colour I have up. Now this twists round, which I like, and again I want to add some darkness to that. So under here, just picking out areas that I think could do with a bit more dark. And what I do also tend to do is I leave little gaps of white, and that's when I have to start to bring them together. So take that down, and let's drop a little bit more to here. And again, you'll see I'm not actually covering the whole of this is where the looseness comes in. The great thing about watercolour is that a lot of it does it itself. And I think that's wonderful and refreshing. So obviously it's going to be darker where the leaf's turned over. I'm just going to keep some of that colour there, soften it, because it's got quite hard edges. And here it's probably a bit too neat. I've done quite a neat line, which is easy, just a slight soften. Right, so now I want the strongest colour I can, and this is where you have to be really careful. You don't want to overwork or finish. So being really gentle with it. Okay, for me, I think that's it. So it looks a bit stark at the moment. What I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and take the masking fluid off, because what I'm doing is letting other areas dry. So I'm not going to start on this green area because I know that droplet will still be wet, but the red should be fine. So using a mask away, it just grabs the masking fluid. Now that droplet hasn't worked fully, but that's easily solved. It grabs the masking fluid and keeps really nice, clean, white areas. So while that green is drying a little bit, I can now bring back. What happens under a droplet is it has dark areas just where it's sitting on the rose. So I'm using some of the green in that initial red just to not go around the whole area, but just to emphasise where the droplets are sitting on the rose. My brush is a bit too dry. So what I've done is I've made sure I've wet the tip, not the belly, because I don't want it to be too wet. So all these tips are as simple as how you hold your brush, what you can do with it, how you load it. So that needs a little bit more colour because it's picking up some of the colour of the rose. But I don't want to fiddle with them too much because they're working okay. And let's see if the green has dried before I finish off with the background. So it's just grabbing the masking fluid. And again, I need to just indicate that it's a droplet. Might not have worked as effectively. That doesn't matter. Okay. So that looks nice as it is. I don't want to do any more work to this. I like the looseness, but it looks a bit stark. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add a background. And again, with this background, I need to make sure that I don't leave gaps, which I'm prone to doing. So just wetting it with the cleanest water I have, which would have been clean if I'd remembered to keep a water pot clean. If you're at home, you can obviously make sure you keep it clean, and if you have done like I have, just refresh. Okay. There may be some bleeding in if the paint isn't fully dry, but I'm not worried about that. That's not a problem. It's part of the character. Okay, not too bad. And I'm going up to the rose. And I'm just going to be careful around here because I don't want to add the background colour into that droplet very strongly. You'll see artists will be tipping their heads, and the reason I'm tipping is because I can then see where I have or have not added the water. So by tipping I can see where it's shiny, which is where the water is. You can move the board, but this board's stuck down, so I don't move it while filming.
Sorry.
But there we go. And you'll notice I've not gone right to the edge. I'm going to just blast some colour around the rose so it kind of does the watercolour thing and bleeds out. Right, so the colour I'm going to use for this is the French ultramarine. Why? Because it's a complementary colour to the reds, and I've also used it in the greens. So I'm not adding another colour to it, I'm just adding a harmonising colour. And this is why I keep my palette quite small, because like I said before, they work together. Just blast it on and let the water do the job for you. So here are the areas I tend to leave gaps. If I'm a bit more careful. You can see this time I'm using the bigger brush because I don't want the detail. I'm not looking for the control. I'm looking for the loose freshness of this colour. It's working well. So I'm going to start down here and add some darker. What I don't want is it all the same tone all the way around. So now, just with what I've got left on my brush, I'm going to soften and use a much lighter tone. And this is the only area I'm going to be careful with around that drop. Just to highlight it and bring it out. Go. So, as with watercolour, that is going to now continue to create its own patterns, and you can see the lovely granulating effects that the French ultramarine does against the harshness and the sharpness of the rose. So I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you try out the new 35 new colours in the HORADAM range. And join me later in the week for another live demonstration.